and the Kardashians want to start wearing do-rags, well, let them buy do-rags from Black people. You know, they don't have to, we don't have to allow, you know, the Gucci's or whatever to make things that derived in our culture and then make money off of us.
Yeah, because they definitely have had a lot of free promotion in these rap songs over the decades.
Right. And that's the other thing. I'm like, let's rap about Black brands.
Exactly. Exactly. So who were some of the Black fashion pioneers? Who are some of the names that we should know about, that we should start telling other people about, who really set the stage for Black fashion, and not just in America, but across the world?
I have a lot of favorites. You know, I share them all on my podcast, but I'll definitely say one of those I would say is Willie Smith. So he is an American designer. He's passed away now, but he was very popular in the 80s, and he has to date the most successful brand ever. And that, unfortunately, his brand isn't existing anymore. Like, you can probably just find it in vintage stores or for people who are living in that time and purchased it. But, you know, at the time of his work, he was highly successful. Like, having Willie Smith clothing or Willie wear clothing was the it thing for both men and women. And he kind of set the pace for not just Black designers, but designers in general. I would also say Zelda Wind Valdez. She is credited with creating the Playboy Buddy outfit. So a lot of people see that and they have no idea that that was conceptualized by a Black woman. But she would do fashion shows in the Playboy Bunny Club back when it was just a club. And, you know, the staff really wanted something for their waitresses that accentuated their body. And that's what she was known for, because she used to work with curvaceous Black women. She dressed like Ella Fitzgerald, Josephine Baker, Dorothy Dandridge, all of these curvaceous, beautiful Black women. And she was known for outfitting, like really creating things that fit our curves. And they kind of wanted that same look for the Playboy Bunny waitresses. And so she created this like waist snatching, curvy outfit that like is still in use today. Right. There's also like Ann Lowe, who created Jackie Onassis Kennedy's wedding dress. Like, that is in the museums today. And many people aren't aware that a Black woman created her wedding dress. And her wedding dress has been like the talk of the town when it comes to like first ladies and their clothing and like some of the amazing pieces that they've worn in history. And a Black woman created that. And not only did she create it, but she created it in like 10 days. And that's because she made one version, and unfortunately her studio had flooded. So all of the dresses, the wedding dress and the bridesmaids dresses, were destroyed, but she still had to come up with dresses for the wedding. And so she whipped it up in 10 days and was able to deliver this phenomenal dress still. So that's just like a few of my favorite figures. And that just kind of shows you like the work that we've done over the years and how we've contributed to the industry. But a lot of those stories have been lost. So I love the different platforms outside of mine, but like museums and people who are working in fashion to really start like increasing the buzz around these names so that they aren't forgotten and people can learn about the history.
Right. Is there a fashion museum, like a Black or a fashion museum or a Black fashion museum?
There used to be. So there's this woman named Lois Alexander. She's no longer living. I think she passed away in 2009, if I'm not mistaken. But she actually is a designer herself, and she created the Black Fashion Museum. And it was the largest collection of clothing either worn by Black people or designed by Black people since colonial times. So she's had pieces that were created by enslaved women. She had dresses created by Ann Lowe, who created Jackie Kennedy's wedding dress. She's had the costumes from the original play The Wiz because that was also created by Black people. So there was a Black fashion museum for a time. It was actually in Harlem, but upon her passing, she donated all of that, or her daughter, I'm sorry, donated all of that stuff to the Smithsonian, to the African American Museum at the Smithsonian. So they now have that collection.
Okay.
Um,
That's so cool.
but I would love if something like that could be revived again. I'd love to do it, to have a Black fashion museum, and, you know, something that can stand the test of time. Like, I would want it to be around like the other fashion museums that are out there.
Right. So what's because I did a little research with a little bit of time that I had, not too extensive, but was Ann Lowe one of the first recognized Black fashion designers?
Yeah, so she is considered the first Black fashion designer, or who people recognize. Obviously, there are people before her, but like, she's recognized as the first Black high fashion designer.
Okay. And then then you have others who followed behind her and just creating this great stuff. So I see, because I was looking at different podcasts that you posted, and I like one that caught my eye was the history and impact of Sean John. And so, you know, growing up, especially in the bad boy area, I grew up in that era. I got it. I get it when I see you create a podcast about the history and impact of Sean John, because Sean John has had a definite impact, whether it's just urban casual wear, even dressing up, looking your fly. So why did you feel like you needed to make a podcast on the history and impact of Sean John?
Well, I thought it was important because a lot of people don't understand the history of the brand or the impact of the brand. And a lot of people think the impact just extends onto, it was just a popular brand by Diddy at the time. But I'm like, if you really dig deep into it, you'll find out that it's been more influential than we could have ever imagined. So Sean John wasn't unique, you know, because it came out at the time where every other like rapper had a brand. Like, there was Rockaware, you know, every rapper, that was kind of the thing for rappers in the 90s. It's like, you're a rapper, you part of a crew, like every rapper had their crew, and then you also had a client. That's just how John was no different. But it is the longest lasting, like, quote unquote urban clothing line. Like, all of those other lines do not exist. Like, Sean John is currently in production today, not just like things that you see at the thrift store, but like, they make new clothes, you know, today you can find them at Macy's. Also, Sean John was one of the few Black brands to really transition into like the luxury fashion or the high fashion space. Like, not a lot of Black brands were showing at New York Fashion Week. You know, you didn't really see them at the runways, but Sean John, Fat Farm, and Baby Phat, I think, were like the main brands that you could go and see them like on the runways. They were part of like that fashion scene. And during the 90s and early 2000s, that was really important. Like, fashion worked a little bit differently than it does today. So for you to be at New York Fashion Week, that was kind of like your stamp of approval, your like check mark that you were a legit brand. Like, you were like a Vogue backed or magazine backed brand. The other thing about Sean John is that Diddy was the first Black designer to receive a CFDA award for menswear, and that's basically like the Oscars of fashion. He was the first Black designer to receive that, which is interesting because he's not what you would consider a traditional designer, you know. And also, this was an urban brand. Like, this is not like something like Polo Ralph Lauren or Calvin Klein, which were his competitors, or like Tom Ford, which was like his competitor in that category. This was a Black brand from a dude from Harlem, you know, like worn by rappers, worn by like kids from the ghetto. Like, it wasn't anything that you would really think of when you think high fashion at the time. And it won this big award. It beat out like all of these top luxury brands for this award. And like Sean John really just was able to transition not just from like streetwear clothing, but to also dress up clothing and kind of just provide you with a lifestyle brand and lifestyle pieces outside of just like, you know, your puffer jackets or your jeans or whatever. And so I think it's important for people to recognize like, yeah, we may not be wearing or into Sean John like that nowadays, but you know, let's not forget all of the things that it's done for the fashion industry, how it's paved the way. Like Sean John really is the blueprint for all of the like hot brands that people are rocking today, like all the off-white stuff, Hood by Air, Fear of God, all of that stuff that people wear today, that's basically Sean John with another name on it.
Right, right. Now that's cool, and I think we need to know that. We need to understand that. But like I said, when I saw it, I got it because I remember, you know, the best shirts I had coming up, especially like high school, college. Some of the best shirts I had was Sean John, and they were, you know, my button-up shirts. And then you would go into the stores, some of the best. Right, right. And then, you know, you see nice, real nice, not like your Easter Sunday suits, but like real nice suits made from Sean John. So I'm like, okay, Sean John has something good. But so with all that being said, why is it important for Black people to have our space in the fashion industry, or to even be recognized in the fashion industry?
Well, it's important for us to control our own narrative. You know, like we've been talking about, you know, Black people have contributed so much. A lot of mainstream style comes from us, and it's important for us to own that. So because it is ours, we created it, we should also be able to profit off of it. Black people are like the top consumers, you know, when it comes to fashion and beauty, but we don't have like stake in the game. You know, like we aren't at the top of the industry in terms of like ownership or owning any of the big companies or making any of the money that we need to be making from our style. So I think it's important for us to be able to not only contribute to the industry in terms of creative and ideas, but to also own it and to profit off of it.
Right.
And I think that's a long road, you know, because that requires us, or, you know, to kind of break down barriers and fight for our space and for our equity, and to create our own things as well, to make sure that we're getting that ownership and then create space for other people and help people come up. So that is a long road, but there are a lot of resources and people out there that are kind of doing the work to make sure they're, you know, we're getting to that place. Like two of my favorite resources, one of them is called Harlem Fashion Row. And they're essentially like a fashion organization that really helps Black designers kind of grow their business, you know, by giving them money and grants and exposure and all of that, you know, so they can have a stake in the game when it comes to fashion. And another one that's doing a similar thing is the Black in Fashion Council. I think that was just launched like this year. Like they're really working to create diversity in the industry to make sure that we're not just there, but that we own a piece, because ownership is important.
Yes, yes. We one of my favorite historians, Dr. John Henry Clark, is always saying, well, he used to always say, until we control our industries, we just like passerbys, we just participants.
Exactly.
We should no longer be the labor class for somebody else.
Exactly. And I think for fashion, it's very like that's the most apparent, is that we have been the labor class for so long. Like people tap people for creative things, like, oh, they want a Black stylist, a Black hairstylist, a Black designer, you know, all of that. But, you know, they never tap Black people for the leadership position. Like, why don't you want a Black president of this company, you know, a Black finance officer? Like, why don't you go to a Black investment firm for money? Like, you know, and we really need to get up in those leadership positions to really have like true skin in the game.
Right, right. I'm going to connect you with there's Tallahassee African Fashion Week. It happens once a year. I actually had the
Oh,
privilege of hosting the last two shows, but it's a Candace May and Gail May is a mother and daughter combination, and this now I don't know what's going to happen this year with Corona, but
yeah.
um, I'm definitely still going to connect you with them because what you're doing and what they're doing is similar, and I'm sure you two can
Yeah,
help each
please
other.
do. I
Yeah, I
love
will.
connecting with like-minded people.
Yeah, so I needed to say that before I forget it because I know once I said it, it will be in my mind. But definitely want to connect you with Candace because I can see you two being able to help each other. Um, so I'm definitely going to do that. But when you're talking about us controlling our own spaces, that's what I thought about. Um, Black people who are in the fashion industry who may not be the well-known fashion designers, but they're fashion designers nevertheless. They are amazing
Right.
fashion designers, and we need to know who those people are and just connecting everybody. So I'm definitely anybody I know, most people I learn about fashion, I'm gonna be connecting them to you. So
Well,
definitely,
I'm here for it.
yes, ma'am. So culture, we talked about culture, we talked about fashion. Um, how does culture play a role into the fashion that's created, or even how the fashion is wore by the people who create the culture and create the fashion?
It's intertwined. Like fashion is an expression of culture.
Yeah.
Um, and like the greatest example I can think of is like, hip hop is one example where it's very evident that fashion is an expression of culture. You think about how people from the North dress, from New York versus people from the South, like people from Atlanta, how they dress.
Hmm.
That's an expression of their day to day culture. Like the joke online is like people from New York, they wear Tim's 24/7,
Yeah.
365 days a year, because that's a fashion piece that's an expression of the culture and of like their lifestyle in that area. So I think it really is intertwined, and that's why it's a bit frustrating when you have white spaces that kind of culturally appropriate because they're taking the fashion without understanding the culture that's connected to it. And then even beyond that, without giving credit or appreciating the people where it comes from. And so they're detaching it from its meaning.
Right.
Uh, and that's where it gets just really insulting and like frustrating for us because like we having that happen to us consistently where people don't understand like for you this is just like these are boxer braids, right? Like, but for us, these are cornrows. This is the way that we've been wearing our hair for years. This is a protective style for Black women. Like, it's connected to so many things that you couldn't even begin to imagine because you didn't
Yes.
take the time, to do so.
Right. Right. Yeah. When I learned that some braiding patterns were actually maps to freedom,
Right.
it's you have to take the time, especially those non-black people who call themselves allies. I was watching a girl girlfriends, it's on Netflix now, so I was watching it,
Yeah. I
and
love
they did an
girlfriends.
episode, right? That's my show. But they did the episode with Lynn's uh, white
Her
sister,
sister.
yeah,
Yeah.
and she was just appropriating. But one thing that she said I thought was very important, even though in the show they made it like, okay, this was the reconciliation, but she was like, I can't help it. I just love Black culture. And I'm just sitting on edge, waiting on her to follow that up with. And I love Black people as well, but it's just like the way it came out. I just love Black culture. It's like, well, Black people make that culture, but it's like
Right.
exactly what you were saying. It's the people around the world who are not Black have learned to separate Black people from Black culture, and so it's easy to throw up the Wu Tang sign without understanding the
Exactly.
struggle of Wu Tang, or even
Exactly.
like these brands, everybody was mad at Gucci for the things that they were doing. Um, all these when they the one brand that had the black boy in the shirt, the best monkey in the jungle, all those things.
Mhm.
Like what are your thoughts when these